Hello, everyone. Welcome to our sessions on research methodology. Today, we'll be discussing uh, scientific evidence in continuation to the discussion on evidences, theories, and laws. We'll be discussing scientific evidences and other sessions on research methodology. Here, you can see that the scientific evidence is evidence that serves to either support or counter a scientific theory or hypothesis. Such evidence is expected to be empirical evidence and empirical or experiential evidence and interpretable in accordance with scientific method. Scientific evidence is information gathered from scientific research, which takes a lot of time. Usually, you know that research will take a lot of time and effort, and the evidence is actually gathered through actual scientific research in the laboratory, and also it requires a lot of patience to conduct. But there are a few things that all this research needs to have in common to make it possible for decision makers and ultimately for all of us to accept it as an evidence. So we will see what are the things that is required in common for a scientific evidence to make it an evidence, to make it an acceptable evidence. First of all, it should be objective and unbiased. If an organization funds a research project that will benefit them financially, then we cannot accept the finding as evidence unless different researchers from unrelated organizations come to the same conclusion through their own independent research. For example, a pharmaceutical company come up with a new drug and they say that, or they claim that their experimental evidence supports the effectiveness or efficacy of this drug, and there are no side effects on their clinical trials. Since it is a funded research by some private research institute or a pharmaceutical company, there is every possibility that they will highlight their positive findings, and may not be giving due consideration, or they may neglect the clinical evidences in that are not in favor of them. For example, if there are some adverse effects in the clinical trials, there is a possibility that they will cover up that one. So in that case, we cannot depend exclusively on the evidences presented by the company or that concerned institute. So it demands more research institutes or unrelated organizations to conduct the same experiment and prove the same thing. So that means it should be objective, or that evidence should be objective and unbiased. Any bias in the research should be avoided, so that so as to accept it as a proper scientific evidence. Then ensuring results will be valid and accurate. We need to ensure that the results should be valid and accurate. Scientific evidence relies on data, and it is crucial for researchers to ensure that the data they collect is representative of the true situation. Okay, this means that using proved or appropriate ways of collecting and analyzing the data and ensuring the research is conducted ethically and safely. So that means the result should be valid and accurate. The accuracy is only ensured by adopting proper proved methodology, and if there is anything wrong with the methodology that you are adopting, certainly your result will not be valid. So you have to use proper methodology or accepted methodology so that the results can be accepted as an actual result. Okay. This means that providing appropriate ways of collecting and analyzing the data through the proper methodology should be ensured, and the research should be conducted ethically and also should be conducted safely. Then there should be control scenarios, and these control scenarios or controls may also be necessary when testing some effects or impacts, such as when developing a new product such as a medicine or a drug, or evaluating management actions such as farmland pesticide use. So if your control scenario is not proper, then there is every possibility that the result may be wrong in such situations. The control scenario represents the opposite of the scenario being tested, and this is so the results that are seen in the test scenario are guaranteed to be from the tested product or impact and nothing else. So an opposite scenario of the test condition needs to be set as a control, so that our result or our conclusion should be entirely based on the test condition, and the result should guarantee that the test is not affected by anything else, only on the concerned test condition. So the result is actually entirely or exclusively dependent on that test condition that you are setting and nothing else. So that is ensured by the test scenario, which is just opposite to the test condition. Okay. If the scenario involves environmental process of some kind, the test and the control should be ideally carried out under natural conditions or in an environment where the process occur normally. So that is also required if the scenario or the test condition involves an environmental process. So if you are testing on environment, then the control should be ideally be carried in the natural condition, not in if you are studying some environmental impact, it should be on such an environmental or natural condition, not on a laboratory scale condition. So because many parameters in the environment will not be available in a controlled limited condition in the laboratory. So that needs to be tested in such a natural condition. Then another point is peer review and professional consensus. That is also required for accepting a proper evidence. This step is most crucial, and it turns research into evidence that we are talking about. And the researcher has to present their data, results, and their conclusions in the form of a scientific report or a scientific paper. This must be reviewed. This paper, usually, as you know, a peer-reviewed research paper, it should be reviewed by the scientific peers or experts, and only they are qualified to assess the validity of the method and accuracy of the conclusions the researcher has drawn from the results. So it should be reviewed by a peer group or a peer group of reviewers or scientists, and they should be qualified to assess the validity of the methods and accuracy and conclusions of the paper. So then only that peer reviewed paper can be accepted as a good evidence. Now the evidences, it can be collected using various ways, and there are some examples like anecdotal or expert opinions. Expert opinion can be taken as an evidence, or animal studies and cell studies, etc. They are actually experimental conditions. Usually the biological people do animal work and cell line based works. Then case reports and case series or observational studies and case studies are there. Case control studies, which is also again an observational study, whereas animal study is an experimental study. And cohort studies is also another experimental study. Then randomized control trials, especially of drugs or some medicines, that is also experimental study. These and finally we have systematic reviews. Systematic reviews is another category of scientific evidence analysis, and there is from left to right you can see there is a increasing strength of the evidence, because the expert opinion, a single expert opinion cannot be taken as granted like that, and a few animal studies conducted by only a single scientist or a group of or a single laboratory cannot be accepted as such. And there are, when we come to the reports or control studies or cohort studies, where a large population of such studies were conducted and they are analyzed, then in that case, compared to an individual study, such type of multiple cohort studies were having more value when we compare the strength of the evidence. And another one, when we come to the final stage where randomized control trials and also which also depends on some statistical analysis. And finally, we have the systematic review. Systematic review is not actually a scientific means laboratory work. It's a review process, and that means we will systematically review all the works in that area. Maybe 1,000 research papers were published on the concerned topic on different journals worldwide, and all these things will be gathered together, and it will be systematically analyzed using statistical methods, and that results will be consolidated using systematic review process. We have a very scientific way of analyzing such results, and all the works in that particular topic will, all the research papers published in that that particular topic will be consolidated using systematic review, and the results that is generated after the statistical analysis will give you an overall idea or a clear idea about the current status of the work or current status of the topic. So that type of systematic review is again, it will give you a better evidence, because instead of depending on a single study, it screens the entire works that is done and properly analyze that one, and the result, the conclusion that is reaching out of that entire analysis of all the works that is done in that area by different groups of scientists will give you a proper idea about that, or you can again reach a conclusion on that topic. So that is about the different types of works of gathering the scientific evidence and increase in the strength of the evidence. And you can, of course, you can say that systematic review is always at the top. And nowadays, for a publication of a good quality research paper in a high impact journal, a systematic review will be sufficient. Even without a laboratory work, you can publish a paper using a systematic review, and that will be accepted, because that type of works is also having its own value. So, of course, there are experiment based studies or cell studies, animal based studies are there, and such types of works were actually done in the laboratory, whereas the other work, that is a systematic review, which gathers all the evidences from different publications which is available at the time, and that results will be consolidated using the systematic review process, which is also another type of evidence gathering, and that is also widely accepted, and it is accepted by the good quality journals for publication. So now, what proof means in everyday speech? I mentioned in the previous session that proof is not actually a scientific term, or it is not. You can't expect proof in science. And in casual conversation, most of the people use the word proof when they mean that there are indisputable evidence that support that and their idea. So we'll say that already it is proved because there is indisputable evidence which supports your data and your data or your idea. So usually in casual conversation, people use the word proof. But scientists should not be wary of using this term proof. Science does not prove things. As I already mentioned in the previous session, we are not proving anything. Science can and does provide evidence in favor of or against a particular idea. So you can either support the null hypothesis or reject the null hypothesis. Okay. And in science, proofs are possible only in the highly abstract world of mathematics. So you can prove in science where in mathematics, but not in other actual biological or other environmental systems. What should scientists say instead of proof? There, the scientist should have used the term evidence instead of the word proof. When we test our hypothesis, we obtain evidence that supports or rejects the hypothesis. We do not prove our hypothesis, we support with evidence. Proof suggests that a matter is completely settled and that we have had the last word on something. In science, we are constantly adding to and refining our knowledge, because it's a continuous process, and just like learning, it's a continuous process. This gathering of the gathering of evidence and supporting your hypothesis or rejecting the hypothesis, that's a continuing process. When we have a sufficiently large body of evidence supporting an idea, we accept the idea. So that's what happens in the science. For example, we accept that DNA is copied into mRNA, which directs the synthesis of protein, because many studies have provided evidence that this is the case, and no studies have shown this idea is wrong. So we generally accept that idea because of a increasing strength of the evidence. So we have a very high degree of confidence that this idea is correct. However, we remain open to the possibility that maybe in if somebody find at some point in future that there is more to the story than we understand at this moment, then we are bound to accept that one. If later on somebody come up with an idea or a proof that no, there are other possibilities of production of protein, then we are bound to, science is bound to accept that one based on the additional evidence that is obtained at that time. Okay. Scientists are generally careful not to claim more than their evidence supports. So this in no way suggests that the science is unsure or unreliable, but it reminds us that our current understanding is not the last word on the subject. We are always open for further evidences and modifications in our hypothesis or theory, and if some new evidence come up, certainly we are bound to accept it. Practicing scientists know this very well, but the general public is less clear about this concept, mainly because they do not understand clearly how science works. And this is made worse when newspaper articles say something like scientists have proved that or this, and which suggests that there is something more, there is nothing more to be said about the subject or discovered about the subject. So if you say that you proved that thing, then it's the end of the things. That is, now the chapter is closed. We are not open for any further research and discussion. That's normally newspaper articles may say something like that. People who are not trained in science do not realize that the answers in science may change with the time, not necessarily because they are wrong, but because they are incomplete descriptions of the reality, and new evidences requires fine tuning of the existing answer. Okay, so this is about the evidences and proofs in science. Okay, so there is only evidence and not proof in science. So thank you.